Dear Diary.
Dear Diary.
Dear Diary, wow, today was a really hard day.
Dear Diary, I find sometimes my life can be hard.
Dear Diary, it will pass and it will be okay.
Dear Diary, I feel like today is going to be...
Shh, the Indigo Diaries. Dear Diary, welcome world to the Indigo Diaries. First, let me introduce you to Series 1, The World Through Your Eyes, with me, your host, Natasha Hickling. The Indigo Diaries is a podcast for those who want to learn about ADHD through others' experiences. And Happy New Year, everybody. We're back in 2023. I can't believe it's actually been almost 2 years since I started this podcast. And we've been having a lot of tuning into Series 3 with really good expert guests. But I always love coming back to Series 1. It's really where my heart is and why I started this podcast. And I'm really excited to start off this new year with a new guest. So, welcome to Series 1, Fiona.
Hi, Natasha. Happy New Year. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. So let me tell you a bit about Fiona. Fiona is 43 and lives in London with her husband and 2 children. She is a transformative life coach supporting women with ADHD to fully embrace who they are. For the full bio, please look at the description below. So, Fiona, this is your kind of place to tell your story. So where do you want to start?
I know, it's so exciting to actually tell my story to somebody who's willing to listen. My husband's heard it so many times. So where shall I start? Well, I was diagnosed with ADHD at the age of 42. So that was, a year ago, actually, this month. So, yeah. And I had always felt very different compared to, my friends, and, just put a lot of that down to just the fact that, I'm just really deep, I'm I'm complicated. And going back to being in school, I really struggled through school. So when I was in primary school, there was a lot of kind of scaffolding there. So I, had a lot more support from teachers, and things were not so noticeable in school as they were at home at that time. But going into secondary school was where everything really unraveled for me. So I just remember that first day and being in, this bloody huge school. I mean, I think there was about 1,400 students.
What?
Yeah.
That's a huge school.
Yeah, 2 secondary schools had merged together. And I can't even tell you, Natasha, the panic and bloody anxiety I felt. It was unreal. I, and it kind of, it started from there really. I would lose my books, bags. Oh my God, the amount of school books and bags I left on buses is just, it is actually hilarious. to the point where I got put on school report for 6 months, okay, because they didn't believe me. They were like, there's no way you could lose that many bags and books. They thought, the teachers thought that it was just me kind of making excuses.
Well, it's like that thing of like, oh, my dog ate my homework. It does, when you've lost that many and there's not that understanding, people just see it as you're making it up.
Yeah, totally. And it didn't, and my mum was my mum was quite organized, and she, the house was always really tidy and stuff. So for her, it was really difficult for her to accept me losing so many things. And her, she wasn't the most patient with me when it came to like losing books and, bags and God knows what. And I ended up, just kind of struggling through school. I would be in class listening to the teacher, and I'd really get it at the time. And, the minute they stopped talking, I would be like, oh, what's just happened? I've got no idea, what I'm supposed to be doing. Just like most other people that have, experienced, that have that experience with ADHD. But I was also very hyperactive, and, my mind just would not stop. It was constant, constantly just, why are you like this? Why can't you just get yourself together? So there was a lot of that kind of, real inner critic going on there. But So basically, I managed to get to sixth form, scraped through sixth form. My dad was insistent that I go to university. So I stayed at home, but I went to local university, and I did business and marketing, had absolutely no interest in it whatsoever. Wanted to be a psychologist, but didn't get the grades. So I went to uni, sat in lectures, literally couldn't understand anything that was going on because my brain just obviously had no interest. So why, I certainly wasn't going to be taking anything in. And I dropped out after 9 months. So I was working in Woolworths at the time. Do you remember Woolworths?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, the pick and mix. I was just thinking Woolworths, the pick and mix. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love that place. So I was working there part-time whilst I was at uni. So nice. I basically dropped out of uni and carried on working there for, must have been about a year, I think. And then through contacts, I ended up getting a job in the corporate world as an account manager. So my role was to support families who are relocating overseas with their companies. So it was a really, really interesting job. And the part of it that I loved was the, supporting the families. It was coaching, really. It was a lot of the times I would be speaking to the wives. So we'd be organising, we'd be organising, their home search, school search, settling in services, moving all of their possessions from one country to the other. And it's, one of the toughest things that, family can go through, I think.
It is,
or one of, And so I did that, and I actually stayed in that job for 10 years.
Wow.
I loved it. So, was promoted a few times, really, really enjoyed it. The part of it that I massively struggled with was the admin. Oh my gosh, it was it was a bit of a car crash, really. I managed to kind of just, muddle through, but I'd find myself like getting paperwork and stuff and just leaving it to just pile up next to my desk. And, a couple of weeks in, I'd look, and it was just things that I had to file away, because back in the day, everything went into filing cabinets. So showing my age there. But so the paperwork was just, it was honestly, it would like build up around me as I was sitting at my desk. So I then met my husband, and we had a child, and the idea of going back to work full time, because that was the only option that I was given, just didn't sit well with me. I think deep down I knew that I was really going to struggle with all of the things that I needed to do. So luckily we'd already got our mortgage on our place, so I was able to take a year out, like an extra year on top of my maternity leave. And it was that actually during that time that I decided that I was going to retrain as a makeup artist.
Wow. I love how we've gone from school to Woolworths to account manager to makeup artist. Yeah. What made you kind of go into that?
So, but I always loved makeup as a child. I loved it was definitely one of my, hyper focused on it big time. I would, I had makeup books I would read, and like I loved looking at that, the techniques and how they applied the makeup. And one of the really big things that I loved was actually like having that one-to-one connection. So I loved if my sisters, because I was one of 4 girls, my 3 sisters are older than me, but I loved like sitting there doing their makeup. And we'd like, because I don't know, there's something about it, and I think it's the same with hairdressing as well. Like when you sit in a chair, like to have your makeup or hair done, there's something, you end up having really quite deep and meaningful conversations.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, especially if you like sat there for a long time. But what I'm listening to when you're talking about like the family, about here, it's all to do with the people. Like when you talked about account managing, I was like, account managing, and you meant the family, the people, the connection.
Yeah, so that's it. It's been a theme. I'll tell you, I'll go back in a second, but I was just thinking about something actually, that when I think about how young that really did start from. But so I started the makeup, and started training to be a makeup artist, and then I got really lucky. I think because I was, how old was I at the time? I was 30, what was I, 32 when I trained? Yeah, that's right. So I was 32 when I trained, and I ended up training with a guy that was really well known in the industry. He used to head up like quite a lot of the big makeup brands, and he was just amazing. Like he was such a brilliant teacher. He really understood and got me. The whole, like, he'd tell me something once, it wouldn't quite go in. And he had this way of just being able to really help me to, like take in the things that I needed to do. And he ended up hooking me up with a couple of big makeup artists in the industry.
Wow.
And I ended up doing a lot of kind of assisting work with them when I first started out. So I've worked with some of the best kind of photographers and makeup artists in the world, and some amazing like music videos of really big artists, and like fashion shoots and editorials. So yeah, it was such a good experience.
I'm curious, what was your kind of, like you were talking when you were at school, that hyperactive mind?
Yeah.
What was it about that environment? Like, did that suit? Because when you're talking about it, you're smiling and you seem really happy about this. So kind of, how did that environment kind of like go with your ADHD?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that most of the people there were, to be honest. The hours were, sometimes the hours were absolutely crazy. Like you could start a job at 8 a.m. and you might finish at 1 a.m. So I think you have to be a certain type of person to be able to do that. But I loved it. I just loved being on my feet. I loved the variety. Every time someone sits in a chair, it's a new face. So and the job's always so different in terms of the makeup that we did. So yeah, I just loved everything about it, and the people as well. I didn't love the fashion industry for me, because I'm quite deep and sensitive. I found it quite difficult to be in that environment sometimes. So there was parts of it that I struggled with. So because of that, I actually started to do a lot more bridal makeup.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was a freelance artist anyway, so I could kind of pick and choose the jobs that I wanted. And so I started to do a lot more freelance and bridal makeup.
Nice.
And and I love that as well, because I really enjoyed getting to know the brides. That and that, for me, when I think about it, I was coaching them. I was coaching them at the makeup trials. I was coaching them on their wedding days, deep breathing, you name it, like the things that I did.
Yeah, but it's funny how like the whole way through you when you've been speaking, it's this theme of connecting one-to-one, helping them move forward, and like when I think about makeup, it's like transformational, right? Because you transform them from one look to another.
Yes, absolutely. And what I mentioned to you earlier, my mum and dad had a pub when we were growing up. So I come from a big Irish family. My mum and dad owned a pub in London. I mean, they had it for like over 20 years. And we lived above that pub for the first few years of my life when they were kind of getting it up and running. And then obviously we kind of moved out of the pub, but my mum and dad still had their business there. And I spent every weekend in that pub because they were working. And honestly, I'm going back to probably the age of 6 or 7. I remember sitting there with customers, like talking to them about their lives, and just like for my age, I remember and I would sit for ages just listening. And some of them were, they'd be telling you their stories, and I loved it. So yeah, thinking about people, it started for me definitely at a very young age, just connecting with lots of different walks of life.
Wow. Yeah, so this theme, just like, what is it about kind of talking and connecting to people that kind of motivates or inspires you?
Yeah, so I think, do you know what motivates and inspires me about talking to people is I just love listening to people's like their their backgrounds, like where they come from, you know, and I understand like how much you get from being able to talk and say those things, you know, that you might not say to people out loud.
Yeah.
And I also know what it feels like to be around people that just don't want to do that level of talking.
Yeah.
They, you know, that they're there, you know, the small talk they're far more willing to do. And for me, I think I've always wanted, like, anybody that's willing to have a deep conversation. I remember from being really young, just clinging to them for dear life. You know, like, oh my gosh.
I could just see this kid like cling, you know, when they cling onto the bottom of it. But it's that thing of a deep connection. And like, I'm one of those people always say when they meet me, they're like, oh, we know we're going to get into, some people, they'll leave talking to me and they'll go, oh, I didn't expect that. And then like people that know me are like, yeah, that's what you get when you meet Tash. Like, there's no surface level. You're always going to leave knowing something about yourself, or you've dived deeper than you ever have before, because that's just that's what we enjoy.
Yeah, totally. And do you know what I've got? And it's funny, I've got this reputation. I mean, if any of the mums are listening from school, they'll probably laugh. But like, so since my children started school, like, you know, I've kind of got to know some of the parents, and I've got this reputation. When we're out, they'll be like, oh my gosh, if you speak to Fiona, you'll be crying in 5 minutes. and not because I'm saying anything to them to make them cry. It's just I've got that aura that just they just want to kind of offload. And and I love it. I'm there for it.
Brilliant. So after makeup artist,
of course.
What kind of led after that?
Right, so basically lockdown came. So lockdown forced me to really slow down. Honestly, the first time I probably have slowed down in my life. I've met I'll tell you kind of really, when I going back to like a couple of years before, right, I did a makeup shoot, a brand shoot for somebody, and it was a coach. She was a health and wellness coach, and I was listening to her talking to me about, you know, why she was doing the shoot and talking all about her job. And my eyes just lit up. Honestly, I came home. I remember that night saying to my husband, oh my gosh, this woman's job sounds amazing. Like, I would love to do that. And he was like, okay, here you go again. You know, it's just the usual. He knows what I'm like. And and then lockdown came, and I didn't really think that much about it after that, because I was so busy with the makeup, and it was just, you know, you're just on that treadmill, just going from one job to the next. Lockdown came, forced me to slow down. I spent a lot of time in lockdown meditating and journaling, and I'd never done that before, honestly. Like, I've read so many kind of, you know, personal development books and self-help books over the years, but I hadn't ever really, you know, really looked inwards in terms of what it was that I really wanted, and particularly since having the children. So I joined a group coaching program that one of my husband's friends' wives was doing at the time, and there were 6 of us on it, and honestly, it was amazing. We were all so honest, and I think lockdown really brought that out in people anyway, didn't it? Like, people were feeling vulnerable, and for me, everybody felt just so much more open, and just,
you couldn't hide anymore.
No. And it was an amazing time to be a part of that group coaching program, because it really allowed me to say things out loud that I hadn't said in the past. You know, I touched on things, you know, in my childhood and stuff that I hadn't really spoken about. And we got to the last session. We'd done a lot of values work, so looked at our values and the beliefs that we had about ourselves. And we got to the last session, and a couple of the women were just talking about, you know, what they've got out of it. And a couple of them said, oh, you know, like, Fiona, you come across so calm, and, you know, and for me that was quite shocking, because I thought, really?
You're like, what?
I'm normally bouncing off the walls. What are you talking about? But there was something about that, honestly, that group and just being in that coaching environment. So I got to the last session and we were talking about where we wanted to go from here. And I honestly, I just was like, I want to be a coach. Like it just kind of came out. And from that point, that was it. I looked at lots of different courses. I decided to train with a coaching school called Animas, because it was psychology based, which goes back to me wanting to do psychology as a degree when I was at uni. So it felt like a really good fit for me. So I did that course for 6 months, and then had to do lots of practice hours and stuff, and then I qualified as a coach earlier on last year, early 2022. Wow. So yeah,
I love how you I'm coaching you now, but now but I love how you when you kind of went on to talk about the lockdown, your voice kind of got slower and almost like that lady said, calmer.
Yeah. And funny, Natasha, just talking to you then and saying it, I felt my whole body feel calmer.
Yeah. What is it about coaching that brings that out of you?
I think, quite honestly, being still is a really big thing for me. Like actually being still, sitting, listening, deeply connecting. It's just incredible work, and I absolutely love it, because I see the transformation in people, and I just find it so meaningful and rewarding, really. And it's I get to do that as a job. That's makes me feel emotional thinking about it.
Yeah, you found your niche, or your kind of. And it's so crucial when we have ADHD. I mean, it's so crucial for anybody to find that job that really matters. But for people with ADHD, it just, like you said, when there's no interest, like your university degree, there was no interest there. So it was boring and you didn't want to go. And now there's the interest. It's so different.
So different. And every day I get to learn and do all these things that actually I really want to do. I'm not forcing or pushing or, and the thing is, I got diagnosed with ADHD in lockdown.
Okay.
So I was kind of I was coming towards the end of my course when I was diagnosed. Oh. And it all just felt like, whenever it's like that sliding doors, isn't it? When everything seems to kind of just come together. And kind of getting diagnosed was such a big thing for me as well, because I put so many of my traits down to things that had happened in my childhood, and to finally get that, to finally get those answers was oh my gosh, it was I felt like my life was just beginning.
I like that. That's a really nice way of putting it, your life was beginning. But I am going to stop you there. And we're going to come back to that, because I think that's quite a nice cliffhanger for the break. And we'll come back, and I can't wait to see kind of what was it about your ADHD diagnosis that kind of brought that thought and brought that you feel like you could begin. Thanks so much, Fiona. We'll join us after the break. If you would like any more information on Indigo Hub or our Indigo support group, then please check out our website below, or our link to our social media platforms, or email at indigohub.adhd@gmail.com. If you would like to offer any comments, feedback, get support, or if you're interested in the world hearing your story, then please reach out through any of our avenues. As said before, have a positive week. Check in again later. And we're out.
Shh, the Indigo Diaries.
And we're back. And as always, we start talking during the thing. It's like, oh, let's get recording. So here we are. If you didn't join us after the break, then rewind now, because we're joined by Fiona, who was just getting to the point of, we were going through all about her careers. We had even like moments of coaching shifts in the episode, but now we're just kind of getting into that nitty gritty about kind of the ADHD diagnosis. So you're saying that you got diagnosed in lockdown, and then when you were diagnosed, it was kind of, you feel like you could start.
Yeah.
So tell us a bit more about that.
So I think, like, and I'm sure that there's, you know, probably a lot of the listeners that feel like this, but there's always been that, like, I need to do this before that. Okay. Like I need to be ready. I couldn't possibly do that. I couldn't possibly put myself out there because I don't know enough, and there was always that feeling of just not being enough, not doing enough. And when I got that diagnosis, it was like all of that shaming that I had, you know, like I'd shamed myself for so many years, like those questions of, why can't you just do it like everybody else? You know, what is wrong with you? Why are you doing this? And years of just like berating myself and shaming myself. It was like that diagnosis, it was like a release from all of that shame that had been attached to me for so long. And it gave me a new lease of life, really, because I felt more like unapologetic, and I was able to be me without that feeling of, why am I like this?
Wow. So that was very, it's the first time I remember speechless. That was very powerful. And the fact that you can share that here, I really appreciate that. And because obviously everybody's experience when they, and that shame part is so crucial. And that shame of, I know for me, like, it was like all the things that I did, like, you know, getting hyper, doing this, buying things, I always just thought it's me. So like you said earlier, you internalize it with that inner critic. And getting that diagnosis, it's like, oh, okay, it makes sense. It's a reason. It's not me being my character.
Yeah. And I think like once I got the diagnosis, and you know, I'm sure like a lot of us do it, we end up down the rabbit hole looking at, you know, every ADHD thing possible. We'll join all the groups, and ADHD, it's like someone saying to you, you know, don't look for, you know, try not to notice red cars, and all of a sudden that's all you see. It's
I use that metaphor all the time.
Do you?
Yeah.
But it was like ADHD was everywhere.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest part of it was that I ended up connecting with people like me. I was like, oh my gosh, there's a whole world out there of people like me. This is amazing. And yeah, so that diagnosis really led me to you know, like new friendships, you know, being far more unapologetic as well with my family, with my husband, with my children. I was, you know, I didn't need to keep masking. The mask was off, and I was like, you know, I was out there.
I'm here. Fiona is here.
Yeah.
Can I ask you what led to your diagnosis in the first place?
Yeah. So what
got you there?
Yeah. So what led me to the diagnosis was, well, there was a couple of things, and I can't, you know, being ADHD, I can't actually remember which one it was that came first. I know that's
brilliant. The mask is, no, that is absolutely brilliant.
So it could have been two things. So I'm going to share both. My sister sent an article to me. Okay, it was in the Guardian or something. She sent it to me via Instagram. I think it must have been somebody she was following. And the woman, she was 43, and she'd just been diagnosed with ADHD. Clearly my sister was trying to tell me something, and I could have written the article myself. Wow. It was literally like looking, it was like reading a whole my life, really. You know, obviously there was parts that wasn't, but just the theme of, you know, that constant feeling of like rushing and not being able to get the things done in time, and always feeling like you're behind, you're lagging behind and you're trying to catch up. She mentioned rejection sensitivity dysphoria. That for me was something that I didn't realize that I had, but when I read up about it and understood more what RSD actually is, I realized that that I definitely had that. And then so that article, and then I also was being coached at the time. Okay, so I got myself my own coach whilst I was training to be a coach. And unbeknown to me, I picked her, I paid for her. I basically found her on a podcast. But unbeknown to me, she also had ADHD and ASD. And I think we were maybe 3 or 4 sessions in, and she mentioned that she had it, and I just looked at her and I was like, oh my gosh, that's me. That's why I loved her so much. Like, we were really, we just got on so well. And so it was those couple of things really. And so, there was another thing that when I actually realized, when I saw those, when I kind of realized, when I saw the newspaper article and I, recognized that my own coach had ADHD, I went online and I did, one of those online tests. And I remember finishing the test. I didn't tell my husband I was doing it. He was just sitting next to me watching TV. I think he was watching the golf, something really boring. And I did the test. And I remember just as soon as I got to the end, like I ticked so many of the boxes. I was crying. I turned around to my husband crying and I was like, oh my gosh, I've got ADHD. And he was
just
like,
sitting there watching golf.
Honestly, like it was a really quiet evening in. Like, we hadn't even been having a conversation. I just turned around and was like, oh my gosh, I've got ADHD, like crying my eyes out. And he was like, what are you talking about? Because I didn't even tell him I was doing the test online.
That is just brilliant. It's just so brilliant. And then what was his response?
He was just like, oh, really? Like, how do you know? And I was like, I've just done a test. I've just done this online test. He was like, oh, but Fiona, like, you can't diagnose yourself. I was like, I bloody can. I was like really so sure of it. I was like, I can. If I never get a diagnosis, I know for a fact I've got ADHD. I said, it explains so much. It explains everything. And then, first of all, he was a bit like, I'm not sure about that. But about a week in, he started to come around to it. He was like, yeah, it does explain a lot. So
yeah, the red car thing. He saw the ADHD and then then you spot it everywhere.
Totally. Yeah.
Wow.
So it was it was funny really when I think about it.
I like that. It's good that it's a kind of a more positive experience for you, that to kind of see that, go, oh my god, it makes so much sense.
Yeah,
because okay.
No, sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, I hear a lot about kind of I find that everybody has a very different experience, but a lot of people, it is such a relief.
Yeah, I think it's such a mix of emotions, isn't it? But that first part is definitely relief, because it's like, oh my god, 42 years of not knowing, of questioning myself, and of just not feeling enough. It's that real, that's the biggest part for me. It's the not feeling enough. It's feeling like there's something wrong with you every time you go out for a night out, or you're in a social setting with people and you overshare or you interrupt, and coming away from it and just having that feeling of, why do I do that? Why am I so annoying? Why can't I just be like them?
Yeah.
Even though I didn't want to be like them, because I always used to say I love being like, the way I am. I don't want to be normal. Like normal, I'm a rebel. I hated being normal. But in certain situations,
Yeah. I think that's what it is. It's we never really want to be normal, because we are who we are, and we are amazing people. Like every person that I ever meet with ADHD is so fascinating and so amazing in their own way. But it's that thing of, oh, why don't we fit in? Because a lot of us, we feel like it's just us. But then when you said, like, when you got diagnosed and you start reaching, oh my God, there's so many people that have got ADHD, I just don't know any, you know. And it's that thing of, it just didn't know anybody.
Yeah. And it's like, it's almost like, isn't it? It's do you know what? It's a bit of a feeling of like feeling like an alien. And then all of a sudden you find a planet and all the aliens like you are on this planet, and you're like, oh my gosh, you know, there was a whole another planet I didn't even know about.
But you're trying to be an alien, trying to live on this planet, try and be like everybody else. Of course, you're going to internalize that.
Yeah, totally. And it's just, and it's exactly that. It's that feeling of like you internalize it, you feel shame for it, and you don't know why you're doing it. And the thing is, you're so busy masking and trying not to do those things. Right, tonight when I go out, I'm going to sit there and I'm not going to share anything about my private life. I'm going to be, you know, really normal. And then, you know, if I did on the rare occasion do that, I'd be like, God, what a rubbish night that was.
And then you'd lose out because of it. You'd get tired, you know, like the you know, burnout or whatever comes of that, because you're trying to be someone you're not.
Totally.
So since your diagnosis, what you've said, a few things have kind of changed for you. What kind of changes and things like that have you made since your diagnosis?
Okay, so I'd probably say the biggest change that I've made since my diagnosis is really giving myself the space and time that I need each day. So like I used to like be constantly like almost like trying to improve myself all the time. Okay. I would be like, you know, reading all the books, doing all the courses, you know, listening to every podcast possible to try and like fix myself, basically. And now, like, I basically wake up in the morning, I meditate, which is something I never did before lockdown. And that's like non-negotiable for me. So my children know, like, you know, if they come into a room and I'm meditating, they walk straight back out. Yeah, there's clear boundaries in this house. Okay. You know, if I'm feeling overwhelmed or overstimulated because there's too much going on in the house, I just take myself away, go up to my room, give myself the time unapologetically. I'll just say I'm going up. I don't have to like make excuses now or try to you know, like try to like make up for the fact that I've been away for an hour. You know, life is just on my terms. Everything I do now is on my terms. And well, the majority of things. School runs are not on my terms. And I think that's been the biggest change for me, really.
Wow. I love that you've got those boundaries in place. Your kids come in like, no, mum's no, my mum's.
Yeah.
But that's such a good example of setting those boundaries of, you know, because you've got to have those times rather than, I'm going to go and, I don't know, dust the room. I'm going to go upstairs and dust the room for now, and then you come back down and you've not dusted the room, but you just said that because you feel guilty about going upstairs. You're just like, yeah, I'm going to go upstairs.
Yeah, exactly. Like, trying to make excuses as to why you need to go out of the room, or, you know, to kind of go out for a walk with your friends or for a coffee now. And it's made such a positive like it's had such a positive impact on my relationship with my husband as well, because I'm meeting my needs. I'm coming back as a much more present, like I'm just more enjoyable to be around. I'm not constantly anxious and stressed and feeling overwhelmed all the time. Obviously there's times I do feel like that, don't get me wrong, but it's just far less than it was before.
And I feel, I don't know about you, but as a coach and as a person, I feel that's far, for me, that sort of kind of coming to terms with your kind of life being on your terms, meet your needs. it's far greater than any, I don't know, hack or strategy or anything you've got in place, because you're kind of to yourself, you're living the way you need to.
Absolutely. And you know what, and the thing is, like, my coaching is all about that as well. It's that real kind of building that self-compassion and really having understanding of who you are. You know, because without that, all of those hacks and tools, don't get me wrong, it's not that they're all kind of, it's not that they're not useful. It's just that they're not useful for somebody that's burnt out and feeling depleted and anxious and like they've got nothing left in the tank. I think all those things come once you kind of set those clear boundaries.
And which your needs are met, because it's like, I always say it's like a foundation of a house, right? You can't build a house if there's no foundation.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. So you kind of, diagnosis is giving you this kind of new lease, kind of life on your terms. I love that. I'm gonna have to copyright that. Life on my terms. Life on your terms and things like that. Anything else you kind of want to share about your story?
Anything else I want to share about my story? You know what, it's been a long journey. It's been a long journey to get to the point of where I am now in terms of how I feel about, myself and life. And I'm just so grateful that there is such an amazing community of neurospicy, beautiful people in this world that I get to connect with.
That's amazing. You found your planet.
Absolutely.
So you're on this planet with us. Welcome. Brilliant. So any kind of last words or encouragement that you want to leave our listeners with?
So I think what I just like to share is that the best thing that I have done since realizing I have ADHD is finding my people. So finding people that I'm able to really be open and honest with, who totally get me. And I think that really would be the message that I would leave, is to find your people and embrace them.
Yeah, because we can't be the only alien on the world. We've got to find our own weird and unique aliens, or people that maybe not be aliens but support us and love us for who we are. Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, and I like that you said kind of find your people, because it is important to find people that have got ADHD and people that get it, but there's also, it's good to find people that really get you and you get them for being neurotypical or neurodivergent in a different way to ADHD.
Yeah, definitely.
Amazing. So my last question is, where can listeners find you?
Okay, so I'm not very active on social media. I'm still kind of working on that, but I find it all a little bit overwhelming. But you can find me at my website. So that's www.fionaljones.com.
Okay, amazing. And I agree with the social media. So even though I'm doing a podcast, still not the best at it. It's a lot. So if you want Fiona, her website is below, okay, in the details below. Just thank you so much, Fiona. Absolute inspiration. Honestly, it's just been so refreshing, and it's actually made my day.
Oh, thanks, Natasha. First podcast, and it's been absolutely amazing to be here with you.
Good. And thanks so much to kind of, and I always feel a bit emotional at the end, but it's just such an honor for you to chose this platform and these listeners to share your story, and I really appreciate it, and I 100% agree that everybody else will as well.
Thanks, Natasha.
See, again, we leave with another amazing person, another amazing diary, and someone you may be able to relate to in many ways. And I just want to say, as we finish today, please reach out if you want to share your story, because it can make a huge difference. So look out for it in 2 weeks' time, as we'll launch probably an episode of Series 3 with an expert, the world through our eyes. So signing out, see you soon. And remember, find your people. And if you've not found them, keep finding, because they're there. We're here. You just got to do a bit more digging. And we're out.
Dear diary.
Dear diary.
Dear diary.
Today is ending. I'll check in again tomorrow.
Tomorrow is a brand new beginning.
Good night, sweet dreams.
I think tomorrow will be...
Shh.